Good afternoon and welcome to the Public Assurance meeting of the 19th of March 2024. We have a small gathering today. There's myself, Marc Jones, Police and Crime Commissioner for Lincolnshire, and I will throw it over to you, Julia, to introduce yourself.
Yes, good afternoon, Julia Debenham, Deputy Chief Constable for Lincolnshire.
Joe.
Hi, Jo Davison, Director of Strategy Operations in the PCC's office.
And Aubrey.
Afternoon, everyone. My name is Aubrey Williams. I'm Research and Performance Officer for the Commissioner.
Excellent. Thank you all. And have we got any apologies to record, please? We
do, Commissioner. We have apologies from Mr. Malcolm Birch, Chief Executive for the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, and also from Mr. Phil Clark, the Deputy PCC.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, well, we will just go into my introduction, opening remarks. I mean, this is the last one of these meetings before we have the election for Police and Crime Commissioner. So there will be another one of these in the next political term, and we will obviously be determined as to who will be chairing that meeting, but it's a good opportunity, I think, to sort of see where we're up to with all of the priorities that have been agreed previously and what we've been working on. So today, hopefully, we'll be able to sort of round up really on where we've got to so far. I think that's the position. And moving on, Aubrey, to the public question. I believe we have got a question today.
Yep, we have, Commissioner. The question from the public is from a Mr. N. Curtis in Lincoln, and he asks, can you please provide a progress update from the commitment in your plan to introduce 10 alternate fuel vehicles per year and to develop the force's electric vehicle charging infrastructure?
Okay, over to you, Deputy Chief Constable, for the response to the question.
Okay, thank you. So in terms of the update, we've since 2019, we've committed ourselves to introducing alternatively fueled vehicles, which we focused initially very largely around electric vehicles. So we have purchased 24 all-electric vehicles that have now been added to our fleet. That's about sort of 6% of the fleet. So 24 of those are electric. They've gone into a variety of different roles, but most of those sort of into local CID, pool cars, and then for use by our PCSO establishment, because we found that they were the most that's the most effective use for those electric vehicles. Obviously, electric vehicles at the moment, the range is not always what we'd need in terms of being able to have it across the whole fleet. So what we've then looked at is we've also invested in some hybrid vehicles. So where we have to have that higher range, and where these vehicles might need to be used for longer periods of time, and then have less. Obviously, with the electric vehicles, there's the issue around charging that can take some time. So we've gone for a fleet of hybrid vehicles as well, and by the middle of this year we'll have an additional 26 or 26 hybrid vehicles on the fleet. So we're then some of the I know the commitment had been for 10 vehicles a year. We've not actually hit 10 vehicles a year, but over the 5-year period we will have hit 10 vehicles a year, and some of that has been down to the availability of fleet. So as you'll be aware, Commissioner, over the COVID period we had there's been real issues around getting being able to purchase vehicles. So over that period we will have met that commitment of 10 on average a year. So I think pretty good progress being made. Obviously, looking to continue as electric vehicles become more and more modern and capable, as their abilities continue to grow. We are looking at introducing more charging points for them, so that where we are able to put them and where we are able to use them, we can get them charged as quickly as possible. So we've already had, I think back in 2019, we'd got 12 charging points. We've added another 18 charging points for electric vehicles, and have included 10 points at headquarters as well, to try to encourage staff to use sustainable vehicles. So the capital programme ongoing does have an element of funding within there to allow us to continue to upgrade that electrical infrastructure. So hopefully that gives a sufficient update for the member of the public. Happy to take any questions.
No, thank you for that. I think that was really comprehensive. I mean, obviously, one of the issues that still maintains is the fact that the market providing the vehicles still isn't making the mix of fleet that policing will need, and particularly at the more performance end, and that remains a concern. I know that we're both on the policing side and the PCC side have been taking up nationally, things like the armed response vehicles, for example, and the traffic vehicles, which are doing large mileage. That nobody's making the vehicles that ultimately you're going to need. So there are still some challenges, I know, with the provision around that. But I think that's a good update, and it's good to see that, over that period of time, that that sort of self-created target will be hit. So thank you for that. Okay. Okay, so moving on then to the next item, which is the crime performance and exception report. Back over to you, Deputy.
Thank you. Now, I don't know. I wasn't going to propose to go through these slides. The slides are available, and they are, they have a lot of detail in them. I wasn't going to propose to go through the slide. I was going to give a bit of a high-level sort of summary, and then invite any questions if you have them. So I suppose just some good news to start with, that I would just draw from the slides is that overall all recorded crime is down by 5% year on year. So that's quite a, I would say a significant reduction in crime, and is a more significant reduction in crime than other forces. So we know we've had some changes to counting rules for crime, but actually if you compare us with other forces nationally, our reduction is bigger. So I think the national average is about a 1% reduction in crime. So I think that's some really good news just to start with. And I think I would highlight within there as well some really significant reductions in terms of neighbourhood crime. So in some of those baskets of crime that really do matter to people locally, so burglary, vehicle crime, some really significant reductions, again, in terms of last year, so year on year, but particularly when we compare ourselves to pre-COVID levels of crime, we've had sustained reductions. So I think there's some really good news within those crime figures, and violent crime also reduced to an extent. So I think in terms of crime, some really good news in there. I think in terms of something else I would just want to draw out, and I appreciate this isn't going through the slides in any detail at all, but just highlights from that. That we are 14th nationally per 1,000 population around crime. So again, good performance. It shows how safe Lincolnshire is. So 14th out of the sort of 43 forces, but obviously, that's all crime per 1,000 population, and we know as we look at ourselves and compare ourselves to the funding situation where we're kind of at the bottom of the pile, it kind of goes to show the amount of crime that we do have to deal with per officer compared to the national average. The other bits that I just wanted to pull out in terms of being sort of in exception are the ongoing increase in 999 calls. So emergency calls into our contact centre have continued to increase, with a 9% increase in the last 12 months, which is 26% higher than the pre-COVID levels of 999 calls. So, really significant ongoing additional demand into our contact centre, and we know that a large proportion of that is around some of what we call public safety incidents. That isn't an increase in terms of crime per se. It's not people phoning up 999 because they've been burgled, but we do know there's a lot of public safety incidents involved in that. So that's an ongoing theme, and it's a national theme, but it is one that obviously contributes to our workloads. But I think our performance around answering our 999 calls, it remains very strong because we prioritise it. And that also sort of feeds into an 11% overall increase in incidents in the last 12 months. So those calls for service that we are in some way having to respond to has also gone up by 11% and is also higher by 4% than the COVID. I know at some point we'll stop talking about the COVID comparison, but it's one that's still used nationally because we're still looking to see is it going to go back. So I think that just recognition of the increasing demand that's coming into the contact centre and the demand on our resources to respond to incidents is something that's worthy of note. But some, really good news in there in terms of our ability to drive down some of those crime types and some of the results we've had with that. A couple of bits then that I would just pull out of the slides before I hand back to you for any questions that you've got. I think ongoing excellent results in terms of the rural crime team and their contribution to the force, and the really significant reduction that we've had in relation to crime categories and incidents, particularly associated with hare coursing. So I think that investment in that team that was made as part of Precept commitment and uplift has paid absolute dividends, and those results are captured within those slides. And then I suppose going forward, just looking at focus for ongoing activity around outcomes. So much as our outcomes for victims has increased year on year, it is still lower than where I would want it to be. And so I think there's that ongoing focus, just looking at investigations, looking at outcomes for victims, and in particular, looking at our opportunity to exploit the out of court outcomes, which we know can provide real, in appropriate cases, can provide real satisfaction for victims. And we know we have been waiting for the sort of national implementation of an out of court framework that has changed. And as a result of that, the number of out of court disposals that we have issued has decreased, and I think that has impacted on our overall outcome rate. So I think that's an area of focus for us in the months to come. So that was a kind of summary from me, Commissioner. I'm happy to go through the slides and talk to them if you'd like me to share my screen and do that. But they were kind of the highlights that I'd picked out.
Well, just as a general few comments and a couple of questions from me on what you've said so far. I mean, I think it is exceedingly pleasing to see. I'll be honest, over the last 3 or so years, the command team has worked exceedingly hard to put the building blocks in place to make sure that the force has got what it needs to run well. And that's often unseen by the public, how much effort and time is taken in just making sure the systems, the processes, making sure all of the strategies and plans and everything else that the force works on are in place. And that's been a huge bit of work, not least of which dealing with the transition from G4S back to having everything in-house at the same time. And I think all of that work that is visible to us is now starting to be visible to the public through the fact that we're now seeing those crime reductions across the board pretty much. And that's great to see. What we obviously want to do is make sure that that's long-term sustainable and the direction of travel is maintained. And I guess that's the thing that we need to understand. Is there a short-term thing happening here, or is it a longer-term trend? And time will tell as we work through that. And I think that's an important element. But I think it really needs saying that it's been a huge piece of work by the previous chief and the team, obviously very much including yourself, who have driven that forward, and it's made that good long-term difference. I think what's interesting with the contact centre element around the calls, we've seen obviously a 31% decrease in the 101 at the same time as the 26% increase in the 999. And they may or may not be connected. But then on top of that, as we know, we've got the online reporting, which has developed very well. And I think what I would like to see is a bit more data on a regular basis around that. So how many contacts are coming through that route? How long does it take to respond to those? What's the mix of business coming through there? Because I think that would be really important as part of developing that future response, because as people move more and more the channels they use, I can see that being a growing way of contacting the force. And anecdotally, yesterday I spoke to a resident who had to report something to Lincolnshire Police and was praising very highly the online reporting, and saying it was exactly what they needed. They didn't want to do it by coming on the phone. It suited them down to the ground, and I think more and more people will do that. So if we can look into the future to sort of have a bit more data around that, I think that will be useful in helping us plan and manage where we might want to invest in that space as well. With regard to the more specific areas of crime, obviously we know sometimes crimes ebb and flow a little bit. You catch a prolific burglar and you hold them to account for their actions, then obviously we see a decrease in burglary. Because the numbers are quite small in our county, generally 1 or 2 people can have quite a disproportionate impact on that kind of thing. And we saw that very recently with sort of car thefts with the Hanoi burglaries, where people are breaking into the home to take the car keys. On there, we had quite a spate of that over a very short period of time. And what I'm interested in is also how the force does, or should it, maybe it maybe needs to look at a little bit more how we get that messaging out. So as soon as we see a series developing like that, what messages are put out and through what channels to alert the public to try and prevent those crimes happening. Because there did seem to be quite a spate over a fairly short period of time, and I'm just interested whether those mechanisms are already there. So if we see at the front line a series of something happening, how does that link through to strategic comms and actually then delivering that community message to prevent any future crime, if you like, and whether that joins up now, or whether you think it might be something worth exploring to see if we could do any more with.
I think, I mean, on that point in particular, I think that there's probably always going to be more that we can do, but I can certainly assure you that when we have a spate of crime such as those burglaries, they're picked up really quickly and picked up and discussed on the daily management meeting. And our comms team sit on that daily management meeting as part of it. So in terms of that initial response, and whether it might be, sometimes it will be an appeal for witnesses, but actually some of that preventative messaging, we did have a number of messages go out as part of that series of burglaries when it had been picked up, the Hanoi ones, where we'd got 2 or 3 different criminal gangs basically come from outside of the force into Lincolnshire to commit those burglaries. So we do have fairly well articulated ways of us getting those messages out through the DMM, through that daily management meeting, through the neighbourhood teams. So where we've got meetings, offences taking place in particular areas, it'll be through the neighbourhood teams. They're probably tactical comms messages, because it is responding to that tactical issue at the time. I think in terms of the more strategic messaging, that's where we have, and again, we have done some of this in the media. I think where we've had our lead do quite a lot of interviews, whether it's on radio, so using different formats, different ways to try to reach communities. I know that the Chief Inspector, who's got the lead for burglary, has done some interviews on the radio around Hanoi burglaries, talking about how you can keep your keys hidden, using the Faraday pouches to try to protect the keys. So I suppose we've got a range of tactics that we do use and that we do activate when we see a series emerging. What I'm not going to say is that they're 100% successful. They're not going to hit every person, and I think there is, probably, there's always going to be opportunities for doing a bit more and for trying to target potential victims. So that would be an ongoing piece of work for us throughout the year.
I think that's fair to say. I mean, I see some really good work around this, around the county, particularly if I look at social media channels. And I think that the public generally talk about visible policing, and depending who you are, depends on what that means to you. And I think the majority of it is about going to where people are and sharing the messages and having conversations. It isn't necessarily about walking up and down an empty street in Heckington on a Wednesday afternoon. It's different things. And I'll use this as an example of good work where the Sleaford neighbourhood team had picked up on the ground some issues of antisocial driving, particularly around the leisure centre area, particularly at weekends, and they were, residents were concerned about it. The neighbourhood team called in the roads policing unit. The roads policing unit then not only did the enforcement, but were then promoting through social media the enforcement action that they took. Now, as it happened, I was able to lift those messages directly from one social media channel and put it onto the community Facebook pages, which actually reached several thousands of local residents. And the messaging was really positive from residents saying, this is great, it's exactly the kind of policing we want to see. And I guess that's the bit that maybe we need to develop, is that ability. And I guess it is about priorities, but the ability to reach digitally the thousands of people that are in those communities, because that is the visible bit. So all the hard work's being done, but then we're not always, I think, communicating as effectively. So that's maybe something for us to think about as we move forward, because I think getting the messaging out of the good work that's going on, is almost as important as doing the good work in the first place. But especially if they're prevention messages, because I think that's another one where, you'll be working really, really hard to investigate the crime and try and bring people to book, but preventing it is obviously going to be an equally important element. Okay, so moving on then through the report. I'm just coming down there. I mean, at the moment, the other one that stands out really for the wrong reasons, I suppose, is around hate crime. We are seeing an increase in reports of hate crime, and I stress reports. It's hard to tell, isn't it, as to whether it's an increase in reporting or whether it's an increase in hate crime. But what I wasn't clear on was whether that was as a result of particular events. I mean, obviously the one that springs to mind is the tensions that have grown in the Middle East, but whether it's related to that or not. Do we have any breakdown of what those hate crime incidents are, and whether there's any particular strategies being brought to bear to tackle it?
We do, and so one of our, again, we have a chief inspector who has recently picked up the lead, the strategic lead for hate crime, and he recently came, and we've then had some detailed analytical work done around the hate crime, so that we can understand what it is and where it is. That the majority of it, and we are consistent with other forces in this regard, that the majority of the hate crime is sort of racially motivated. That's the bulk of the hate crime, and most of it is lower level. I'm not trying to minimise that, but public order type offences, so name calling type offences, often by people who know each other, often amongst neighbours. So some of what would then fit in with some of the antisocial behaviour reporting. So we've got a profile that we now sort of understand that more. And just to address your question in terms of two issues really that were of a concern to us. One was around sort of immigration on the East Coast and Scampton. Any issues there? So whilst we have had some reports associated to those areas and the hotels in Skegness, they aren't significant in numbers. And actually the overall, whilst we have had a 10% increase, the overall numbers themselves remain relatively low. And then the Gaza sort of Middle East conflict, again, really quite low numbers of crimes associated with that, which, whether we might say it's a good thing that it's not happening, or is it that they're not being reported? Well, I think we have had some reports, but they are low in number. So I don't see, we do, I mean, to assure you, we do monitor this, and we do look for any community impact associated with any of these hate crimes, and certainly, obviously, we've got the issue with Scampton that remains ongoing. And we are, and with the Middle East and Gaza, we are monitoring that all the time and picking up through goal groups chaired by chief officers if there are if there are, community tensions that we need to be dealing with, which there don't appear to be at the moment. So a high number of the hate crimes. So some of the increase in hate crimes is about good recording and better recording, and us just making sure that we are picking up on those records. And some of that, quite a proportion of hate crimes, I mean, by no means the majority, but quite a lot are hate crimes against our own officers and staff. So, we've been very clear that if our own officers and staff are dealing with an incident and are subject to racial abuse or abuse by virtue of their, perceived protected characteristics, that is recorded as well. So we do actually have both an external and an internal view of the hate crime. So we've got a new lead who's now really got the profiles completed and is now developing a plan for what are we now going to be doing. And I think one of the things that we have recognised is perhaps some of the partnership space, that hate crime hasn't been as much of a priority in some of the partnership space as perhaps we might like it to be, much as the numbers are kind of do remain low. So I think that'll be one of the areas that he'll be looking to progress with our partners, is to just make sure we've got those support networks and reporting mechanisms in place for the future. You're on mute.
You're on mute, Commissioner.
Apologies. Two other areas I was going to ask you about that may or may not be linked, but the possession of weapons figures are obviously going up, but again, I know that can be linked to proactivity, so I just wanted to get your take on that. And also the same applies to the figures around drug trafficking, because I know obviously a lot of work has been going on in those spaces, but because anybody looking at these figures would be concerned that they were going up, but it's really to give you the opportunity to explain them.
Yeah, so drug trafficking is we've had a really big increase, and that is absolutely the result of proactive county lines enforcement activity in many parts of the county, and that really is the result of some really excellent police work. Now, the fact that we've got county lines activity going on demonstrates that there are issues there with drug dealing, and county lines, as you know very well, is where people from outside of the area come in and try to manipulate people who are vulnerable to get them to start selling drugs and become involved in drug activity on their behalf. And so we do have some pockets where we have some issues with county lines in the county, and we've been really determined to tackle that. And some of that is what you'll see in those results. So some of it is from county lines activity, some of it is from the kind of Operation Stronghold and summer policing plan. This is in terms of the drugs, some really proactive police work there to make sure that we're using ANPR to stop cars if we've got intelligence, to make sure that we are tackling issues associated with drugs as we see them. We know from many of our neighbourhood policing sort of profiles that many neighbourhoods are still concerned about drugs in their neighbourhoods. So it is something that we've been really proactive about, and I think that is, very much what that increase in drugs trafficking activity is. And I could very happily bring back to a meeting of, an example, a more of a focused example in terms of what we've been doing around drugs. So don't want to give the impression that, drugs are absolutely rife in Lincolnshire, but because they're not. But we do take a really robust approach to dealing with drugs, because we know it's a real concern to the community. So before I move on to weapons, I don't know if there's anything further you'd like on that one, Commissioner.
No, that's fine.
So moving on to weapons, again, numbers are so again sort of 19% increase. So, but that's overall 630 offences. So numbers are relatively low in terms of those weapons. But we have picked up that some of this will be around, again, proactivity and being proactive in those operations that we've done. In the summertime policing plan, that we've had money for knife arches, and that we deploy them to try to ensure that we are catching anybody, or certainly deterring people from carrying weapons. And it'd be fair to say, actually, within those operations, we haven't had a glut of weapons. So that's good news that people aren't routinely carrying weapons around on the street. But we do encourage our officers to use their stop search powers, appropriately where we believe, if we've got intelligence that there is a weapon, and I monitor that through the legitimacy board, just looking at the success, in terms of stop searches completed and items found. Now, what we do know that we've had a bit of a recording issue around possession of weapons, because we know that we have over-recorded weapons, that this is an offence that actually you only need to record when it is proven. And we do know that we have at times over-recorded. So this is something that we're going back to review to say, let's just make sure that we're really happy with what those numbers are. Because there are some, and we've put this proactive messaging out throughout the force, that sometimes we've recorded somebody's possessed a weapon when actually they haven't. It might be that a member of the public had reported seeing somebody with a weapon, and that's been inaccurately recorded. So there are some, accuracy issues associated with that increase. But actually a lot of that will be the proactive policing as well, in terms of targeting those locations, and where we have had, where there have been pockets of activity across the force where we've had an increase in personal robbery, for instance. And as you said it right at the start, it can be one person who's come out of prison or one person who's committing these offences. That's where we will then go in and be much more proactive about doing some stop searches to try to get weapons and try to target them.
Yeah, excellent. Okay. I'm sort of skipping forward in the report really, but I'm moving just to around the road safety element. One of the things that obviously is a focus for all of us is trying to reduce the amount of tragedy that we have on our roads, which is significant, but also criminality that obviously uses the road network. If we can deny them the use of that, then that obviously keeps everybody safe. And I know from the figures that we've got, we are seeing a positive increase in the killed and seriously injured on our roads, which is excellent. And I mean, no doubt that in part is down to the fact that there is a visible roads policing team out across the county. What I want to try and understand is, with that work, whether there's going to be any kind of evaluation of the success of the roads policing unit, or whether we're sort of at the point of going, well, this is just now effective business as usual, and we don't need to consider that, whether it's a proven positive impact.
I mean, I think we are of the view that it is a proven positive impact, but I do think that some further evaluation, and actually what would be really helpful would be perceptions of the public and their perceptions of its impact. I mean, I know that often the public will say that they don't see the police, and that the police aren't visible. But I do think with this, the perception of the public in terms of roads policing and having that team would be a really useful additional narrative. So, we evaluate in terms of the roads policing team come to as part of our performance meeting. They will come and present, and there's obviously the statistics around the killed and seriously injured on the road, which fortunately continues to decrease, but then also looking at the enforcement activity that they do. And the support they give actually to other operational policing. So it's not just enforcement around road safety, it's around enforcement on the roads and catching criminals. The roads policing team have a big job in terms of catching criminals when we get ANPR hits from automatic number plate recognition from across the border, people coming across the border and getting picked up with intelligence. The roads policing team have a really crucial role and are, very often the ones that are deployed very successfully to go and intervene with those vehicles. So it's not something that we've actually commissioned in terms of a formal evaluation. I do think we are very satisfied that it is a very worthwhile investment, just as the rural crime team has been a very worthwhile investment. But I do think actually having some more public perception around the road safety team would be a very valuable piece of work to do as well.
Yeah, and certainly having sort of had a ride along with both the rural team and the roads team in recent weeks, it's clear the passion that the officers have got for their particular areas of specialism, as we have across the force in different areas. They're absolutely passionate about what they're doing, and clearly having people that are exceedingly knowledgeable about a particular area of business does mean that they will have that laser focus on it. So I think that that's definitely working. But yeah, I mean, it's obviously always difficult to know where we want to place future investments, and I think those kind of evaluations are really helpful, aren't they, in understanding, you know, that proven value, not just in the day-to-day, but in that strategic delivery of the overall plan that the Chief Constable has, and then the police and crime plan that I have. So if we've got anything formal into the future, I think that might be useful.
Yeah, well, we do have, so both within the FMS and then within the strategic, so the STRAs, you know, we have an armed policing STRA, we have a dog STRA, we have a roads policing STRA as well, which again will outline the success, and FMS will pick up on the success and also forecast into the future in terms of ongoing requirement. As you know very well, you know, any further investment will, you know, does depend on obviously the budget we've got available and
Indeed.
the people we've got out on the street. So,
Yeah.
but I think they are really passionate and proud of what they do, and you know, rightly so, and very very proactive to support their colleagues.
Yeah, and certainly some of the investment might not come in the form of additional workforce. It might be in the technology provided to enable them to be doing the jobs that they want. And obviously, as we know, finding capital investment is easier than revenue to pay wages. So I'm always keen to look at, can we make them more efficient and effective by providing them better tools to do the job, and that I think is always worth looking at. So no, that's very welcome. I don't want to dwell on this next point, but I want to make the point, looking at the information, the data around the firearms licensing situation. It's some 8 years now since I started in this role, and it's fair to say when I did, we were renowned for being the worst in the country at the way our firearms licensing ran. And I'd have to say that was no reflection on the people that were working in the department. They were under-resourced. The system was creaking. And in fairly short order, within a couple of years, that was turned around with some investment and some dedication from additional people going in there. But it's just really to say, since then, the performance has been maintained as one of, if not the best in the country consistently. And I think that really is worth just highlighting, because that isn't just about providing a service to 20,000 people who are firearms license holders. It's also about protecting everybody that lives in the county, and I think that's a hugely important bit of work that you know, can go unnoticed if we don't pick it up. So it was just a point from me, really, that it's not just impressive that we ended up going from the position we were in to the position we got to. It's been maintained year in, year out, and I think that is a huge achievement, and the team should be thanked for that, because it's an important piece of business.
Thank you, and I'll pass that on.
Okay. So moving on to response times. I know response is sort of always going to have fluctuations, not least of which because the jobs that they're attending will fluctuate in the amount of time that they need to spend at them before they can be free to go to the next role. But I know it's always an area that's under pressure, not just in Lincolnshire, but generally. But obviously, the difference between that sort of rural and urban time, there seems to be of late a bit more pressure coming to bear in the more urban areas, and it's just sort of understanding if that was due to anything, whether that's more work, whether it's not having people that are coming through training yet. What are your views on the response times?
I think it's a mixture of the above. So if we looked at the chart of incidents generally, so I'm not just talking about urgent incidents, but we know we've got more incidents coming in, which means that officers are more likely to be tied up dealing with incidents when something urgent comes in, and not everything you'd want to be able to leave. Now we are reviewing this as part of our evaluation of our target operating model, just to have a look and say, well, have we got our processes right? Are we sending people to the right incidents? Because it is something that we do want to improve on. And as you'll know, there are some national targets that are going to be coming in that will have or that are likely to be coming in that will have a 15-minute for urgent, 15-minute for rural and for urban, the same with no differential. So there's some so some of this will be an increase in incidents. Some of it will be the capacity of our officers to respond with their blues and twos on. So where we've got in urban, a lot of our student officers have gone into urban localities where you've got bigger shifts, where they've got people who can tutor them, and so they can do that kind of learning on the ground. But that does mean that quite a lot of our urban or a higher proportion of our urban response capability doesn't have the blues and twos yet, because we're just getting through that training and getting them up to that standard. So that will be why some of that is. So it is something that we are tracking. It isn't where I'd want it to be at the moment, in all honesty, in terms of our response. I think we do need to improve that where we possibly can. But I think we do understand some of those pressures that sit behind that make it challenging for us.
Well, I think it's obviously an area that's always of concern to the public about how long it will take to get a response if they need one. But regarding the national targets, I'll be honest, I don't really subscribe to what they're trying to do. That only works if you put the funding formula in place to fund us properly. So until that happens, until they recognise that 2,500 square miles with 5,500 miles of road needs policing differently to somewhere half that size that's got a third more resources, then I'm afraid I have little time for the people that are making those decisions at a national level. So I'm more concerned about what we can do locally to make the best of what we've got than I am about chasing a national target that's unfunded. So I suppose what I'm saying is I want the best for the public, but at the same time, we've got to be reasonable to the force that's trying to deliver it on a very limited budget. And I think we need to be mindful of what we think good performance looks like. I'm not about chasing a target at the expense of doing things well. So, there will be no pressure brought to bear from me to sort of not do a job properly so that you can get on to the next one to chase a national target. I've got a high level of confidence that the force is making good decisions in the best interests of residents, and that is our number one concern. But obviously, we want to work together to make sure that we're driving those performance figures the right way. But like I say, it's not about trying to hit some unfunded target that we're suddenly given from London. Yeah.
I mean, I think the other thing I should, and thank you for your support with that, I think the other thing I should just sort of mention in this regard is also, we spoke about the incidents and calls into the contact centre, but is around the right care, right person, and the progress that we're making there. And some of that is really to try to ensure that we're prioritising our resources against those things that the public would expect us to be attending, and perhaps not picking up some of those other incidents that are that we are not the most appropriate agency to be in the starting blocks for.
Yeah, and I know these things will always be a tension because none of our colleagues locally have got unlimited resources, and we fully understand that. But at the same time, we're not calling nurses to attend burglaries, and we need to make sure the right agency is going to the right work. And if there's then a gap, then we will absolutely support partnership colleagues in bidding for additional funding at a national level. I will definitely be there doing that, but the answer is not to have the police fill in those gaps. It's just not in anybody's interest for that to happen. But certainly we will we'll continue to press the case for fairer funding, not just for the police, but for all of our partners across the county. Okay, so moving on then, we'll move on to the next item, which is the Precept commitment paper. Now, I wanted this really because we collectively agree some priorities which we publicly state in the council tax leaflet that goes out annually. and it's always really important to obviously be able to demonstrate to the public that we've delivered upon the priorities that we set, that their money has paid for. So I think this is a really good paper in delivering on that, to make it transparent what we've done. But over to you to talk to the paper.
Okay, so sorry, I'm just trying to.
That's all right. The toggling between.
Bring it up, yeah. Let me just. Apologies. Right. Oh, apologies for that. It's not. It's right. Well, I'll talk to it. I can't actually see you now. So for some bizarre reason, my screen, my comms have had a little bit of a go slow. Oh, hang on, it's changed its mind now. Okay, so the first, so just going through the paper, obviously the first issue there was about maintaining police officer numbers, which we have managed to do. Our operating model does really rely on us having those numbers available to us so that we could invest in things like neighbourhood teams, the rural crime team and the roads policing team. So, we've maintained our police officer establishment over the course of the year, and we're committed to ensuring that we continue to maintain this. So I've just had the pleasure of, well, as you were there as well, doing that attestation for the new cohort that's just started in March, and we'll have another cohort come in later in the year of probationary officers. So really good to see that. So that's been achieved. Then obviously one of our big commitments was around trying to put extra officers and staff into our specialist unit, so sexual assault and abuse unit. So we don't have a dedicated rape team because and we haven't got the resilience to have a dedicated rape team here, but we do have these dedicated units to the Protecting Vulnerable People teams, who are extremely well trained and well in specialist skills in order to most effectively investigate those most serious offences around some of the sexual assaults and domestic abuse. So we have uplifted resources. We've created a 4-hub model, which means we've got better coverage of the county, so that we're not spending so much time travelling, which is frankly one of the things that was taking quite a lot of officer time. We've got an additional detective inspector who we have committed to introduce the national opposite area sort of model. That detective inspector is leading that for us to make sure that we are doing the best possible service that is based on best possible support to the victim and subject focused under that kind of opposite area banner. The whole premise of that is to try to improve the number of offences brought to justice and improve the quality of investigations and quality of service given to victims. And as you'll be aware, we've got significant training that's going to CID and PVP, so Protecting Vulnerable People detectives, around giving the better rape skills, but we're also rolling out a lot of training within this programme for those initial attenders, so people who will be attending rapes and sexual assaults, so that they know how to use, how to make that interaction with the victim the best it possibly can be. So quite an investment there in terms of people into the teams. We've not as yet managed to recruit everybody into teams, and some of that is because we've not been able to release people from the front line because we're waiting for the numbers to get on the front line with all of our recruitment. But we have put additional supervision and some additional detectives and police staff, and our the programme will get that team up to full strength, hopefully within the next 12 months. And we do have within our kind of sexual offence and domestic abuse categories of crime, those crimes that we do get charged and have a decision from CPS on, that's going to lead to a court attendance. we do have very good CJ outcomes there. We do have very low attrition rates. So we are compared nationally with other forces and regionally, and we are one of the best performing forces in terms of the attrition rate there for some of those offences. So the inference that you can draw from that is that where we've got a case that we know is going to go to court, we're actually with the combined services of ISVAs and IDVAs and OICs, that the support services that we're putting around victims is good and will enable them to sort of maintain going through that process, which, let's face it, is a really challenging process. And you'll be aware that we had a survivor's sort of story that was a winner at the National Vogue event, which was a survivor who spoke of her experience of rape and the whole process with the police and beyond. And it was a really powerful but very positive story, and that was during this last year, received an accolade of the national winner of one of the categories at the National Violence Against Women and Girls event, which I think is just a really positive thing for Lincolnshire to have produced. So, any questions before I move on?
Yeah, just a couple of bits, sort of. Sorry, I'm just finding my place, because you covered some ground there.
Sorry.
No, that was a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It just means that I've just got to scroll back up again. So obviously, I appreciate that one of the challenges we're getting a higher percentage of officers that are younger in service, that are newer, and it's going to take some time for that to embed and develop those skills. Do you see that the training requirements as we move through over the next months and years, whether the training budget is going to significantly change? Because I'm very conscious that all of the people, we've had record numbers of people recruited in the last 3 years. As they pass through the system, they're all going to need additional inputs in different areas. And I'm very conscious that that training budget isn't infinite, and we want to make sure that obviously people have got all of the training and skills that they need. So that would be my first question around that, whether you think there's a bigger plan that we need to work on around that.
So I think it's a really good point. I think we and I think there is something actually from a national perspective here around when training is mandated. And I think for each day's training, it's, the amount of police hours that equates to, is a real issue. And I think there will be a strain and an additional burden for us in the years to come because of that. But that will be all picked up in our force management statement. So through the L&D department, we will be picking that up. And I think certainly in this regard, with the training required for the obsteteria and the sexual offences and domestic abuse, I think we just need to be doing it. I think it's just not something that can be anything other than mandatory, really. So,
no,
but I think we will pick it up through the FMS. That's the process. So the force management statement is the process that will be picking that up so that we can plan into future years.
Because I'm just very conscious that historically, policing generally hasn't been brilliant at developing leadership programs, and that's been worked on quite heavily by the college in recent months. So, taking people who are aspiring to any rank and progression, there's going to become greater opportunities for training, but at the same time, that's obviously a burden on the organisation and takes people away. But I just think that need to make sure that people have got the right skills and training is really important. But and I guess it's how that's going to be managed, because it's everything, isn't it? It's from fitness training to taser to leadership, everything. Particularly when you've got a higher percentage of new starters, they're going to need a lot more input. So I think that's something that we'll need to keep our eye on, and as you say, it'll feature in the force management statement. But I just think it's going to be something that we want to invest in. It's not something we want to limit, in the sense of it's not something I'm seeing as a bad thing. I think it's a really good opportunity to, in the future, have a really great cohort of people in Lincolnshire Police who have got the right training and the right knowledge and skills, but it's going to need some additional funding in the training budget to make that happen, as well as managing all of the extraction time and everything else. So I guess,
and I agree, and I think we should also have a healthy challenge, always retain a healthy challenge around what is mandated training. And I think the police productivity review has picked this up, so that they, so that the college, I mean, we're developing here some really excellent for police officers and police staff, which is really pleasing to see. Some brilliant pathways in terms of leadership development, and really trying to link that from the earliest point in somebody's career through to however far their leadership will go, whether they're police staff or police officers. And that leadership doesn't have to necessarily be upwards, it can be lateral movement as well. So I think we're doing some really, really excellent stuff here, which is an investment, but is a very manageable investment. Police productivity review have picked up some of the costs of some of the other mandatory training which the college come out with, and I think our influence there, we do need to always have an eye on whether we can influence that, because re-accreditation, the thing is, when there's professional competence at play, so as a firearms commander or as a gold public order commander, so a couple of my kind of command portfolios, you cannot not be competent, you cannot afford to not be competent in those areas. So
and just going on to the 101 performance, I mean, we've got now up to 90 call takers, which is great. How it's just how many was that from? That's not referenced in there, and it's being able to understand that sustainable improvement, because I know one of the areas that I've been keen to see is people staying longer, so you retain their skills for longer and you reduce the amount of people that are leaving, therefore you don't need to train as many people, and it's that whole piece. So it's some assurance around not only getting to 90, which is great, but also that there's a robust plan to try and keep as many of that 90 with us for as long as possible.
And so that 90 had come from a starting point of, I think it was 58. So it's a significant investment. But when I say it's a significant investment, the 58 were nowhere near enough to deal with the demand. And obviously, the unfortunate thing is actually that demand has carried on going up whilst we've had those, although the ones have come down, but the 101s have come down. But so that 90 is a really significant investment. And we've also, as you know, last year we've done a real, as part of the sort of post G4S piece of work, we've done that harmonisation piece with staff. And so those who've come across, we've really tried to make sure that we've given a competitive salary that will encourage people to apply and will encourage people to stay. And we are not seeing the attrition that we were previously seeing. We've got, as I've just alluded to, actually with the police staff, the police staff leadership piece, we've got those pieces of work that are designed to encourage people to stay and to progress within the organisation. And that is, we're certainly not seeing the retention problem that we did have within the FCR, which was where we were relying on overtime for basic, covering basic shifts. So people were, frankly, quite exhausted, particularly those ones that were prepared to do the overtime, and where there were disparities around what people were being paid and how they were being remunerated. So what we've put in place, I think, has put us in a really, really healthy position. We will always have people who want to move on and do other things within the organisation, and I think that's that's a good thing. But it's making it manageable and making it something that we're not leaving ourselves without the resilience to deal with that demand and keeping those skills. So I think we're in a pretty healthy place within the contact centre as we stand.
Excellent. Okay, that's back over to you.
Okay, so if I just talk about the investment in the serious collisions investigation unit. So again, whilst we are, the good news is that we obviously have fewer deaths and serious injuries on our road, but we do still have, you know, a significant number, and we've put that investment into that team to try to give the very best possible service that we can to those people who are impacted in that way.
So is that team up to strength now?
Yes, my understanding is yes, it is. We have had some abstractions, but as you do in all teams. Yeah. But yeah, that is fully resourced now.
Excellent.
Then in terms of increasing community confidence and keeping the confidence of the public, so obviously we've you know, mindful of incidents elsewhere nationally. You know, we've ensured that, and I'm talking about, you know, the Wayne Cousins and those incidents which, you know, could really serve to undermine public confidence in the police. You know, we've been very keen to ensure that our vetting and professional standards departments, we've been very robust in terms of some of the messaging internally. Our vetting is, you know, we'd had an uplift in vetting to really make sure that we are maintaining, very clear about our standards and maintaining them. So, you know, that's something that I think, when we have had cases here within Lincolnshire that you know, where we've, you know, had to, officers have been to court and been convicted at court, and where we've dealt with professional standards issues. We're very public about that, and the reason for being very public is so that we can maintain public confidence that we will deal with these things if they occur.
So with the whole professional standards department, the vetting, everything, all the work that's been done, I just wonder whether there's more we could do to be very visible in that work, the volume of work you're doing, what you know, not just the specific outcomes of I suppose what goes very wrong where somebody ends up in court, which is important that we're transparent on that, but actually there's a significant amount of work that's done by professional standards and vetting that actually should be very assuring to the public that you do an amount, you know, however many people are vetted, and that actually that was positive outcome, and that you're on top of all of that. And I just wonder how visible all of that is to the public, and whether that is something we could maybe highlight a little bit more from an assurance point of view.
I certainly think it is. I mean, we tend to, where we are visible is where we have cases that have been in the public domain, and that might be a court case, or it might be a hearing, you know, misconduct hearing, panel hearing. You know, they are generally speaking open to the public and reported on, as you'll have seen over the last year, where we've had those hearings. We don't tend to go proactive with other. I mean, I'm certainly not against it. It's, I suppose it's knowing what we would be looking to go proactive with, really. Well,
I'm just saying, if it was maybe it's something that I'm not saying we take out a page in the newspaper, but it might be something that we want to include as part of our discussions. How many people are vetted on a monthly basis by Lincolnshire Police, and how many don't pass vetting? I mean, just that number alone, I think, would be reassuring to people that the vetting was going on, that it was a regular thing, and that actually there's very few people that are found wanting through that process, because otherwise the only thing they ever hear about vetting and standards is somebody's been to court, which obviously is an important element of transparency, but it's not the whole picture of what PSD or the vetting process are doing. You're doing a huge amount of positive work in basically, obviously, making sure the organisation is well run and has the right people in it, and I just think some of that is quite positive work. So I just wonder if there's maybe something in that that's worth exploring, because the numbers must already exist. It's just about how we use them, and whether what you know. I just think from a public assurance point of view, I think people would be interested to know a little bit more about that world, and the fact that it is doing a lot of good work, not just the negative that they tend to hear in the media.
Okay, and we could certainly explore that outside of here. There is a report, and I'm just trying to think which, because I think we do bring a report to one of the OPCC meetings, actually, around professional standards, around and also at legitimacy board, because we do track the vetting. But yeah, we can certainly
But
explore outside.
We have a 6 monthly meeting with PSD, which is obviously an important element. But I'm just thinking on a more regular basis, just a single data line. Really, I'm not talking about War and Peace, but just something that's very simple, where we know how much activity is going on and what's it delivering. I think would be interesting. But happy to have a conversation offline.
Okay. So moving on, obviously we've got the new neighbourhood policing model that was launched in October, and appreciate there's a review going to be undertaken in that model. I think there's some really good stuff come out of that, some really good feedback from different communities around how we've sort of deployed and tackled some of those local problems. So, but again, that's going to be subject to that review. Also then the launch of the single trust and confidence survey, so taking everything into account, how good a job is Lincolnshire Police doing, so that's part of a national kind of pilot doing this survey, and then there's this response that can answer the questions on a rating of 1 to 5. We know that we've had around about 3,500 responses so far, I think, most of them on social media, most of them hitting 3. So it's a little bit vanilla. I'd have to say there's a little bit of a vanilla in the response there. So I'm not sure quite what that's telling us actually, and quite how we might use it going forward.
Arguably, it's a self-selecting group that take part, and I think the fact that it's coming out as a 3 doesn't really tell you a great amount. But equally, if I'm being really honest, if it was a 2 or a 4, I don't think it would either. I mean, obviously, if everybody was saying it was 1 or 5, then that probably would tell you a bit more. But I think it's really important to know what the public are thinking and feeling. But then it's almost trying to understand the nuances of why they feel that is something that the survey wouldn't be able to tell them. And as you know, quite often, if somebody's had a negative experience of the criminal justice system, not necessarily the police bit, they might still reflect badly that actually my overall experience when I had to deal with Lincolnshire Police wasn't positive. But they might, if pressed, be saying, actually, the police bit was all right. That's often what I hear. So it's difficult, isn't it, to draw too much from a survey of that nature, but
it is. And I wonder, I mean, we do take it down to district level, but again, with the numbers are relatively small, and I just wonder that there's probably an opportunity for us to look at how we link that. And one of the interesting things that has come out of that is that the face-to-face, I mean, again, not necessarily a massive surprise, but face-to-face surveying tends to be more positive than the social media online. And I just wonder, I know the OPCC does its really comprehensive survey, and I just wonder, if there's an opportunity for taking the learning from this and doing something differently with it going forward. But at least that we're on that journey. And I think there are other things that we might look at using, other systems that we might want to have a look at. So, but I think again that's probably for discussion outside of here. But a start of a journey, not yet quite at the end, I would suggest.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that sort of links to this and lots of other things, and it'll be a subject for later, not today, but on a different day, we'll discuss, is around the journey that we've been on around using the Links alert system, because it used to be used jointly by ourselves and Lincolnshire Police, and under not the last chief, but the chief before, he decided not to use it anymore. And yet what we found is trust and confidence in that as a platform, as a way of interacting with tens of thousands of people, is absolutely our strongest, most trusted source of getting information out. And it's got a very diverse take up. I mean, I know of people in their 90s that are using it. I equally know teenagers that are signed up to it. It's a huge resource. And actually, we've had some really interesting data back from the supplier about how it's developed its platform to be able to be really flexible and be of huge value to police forces. And I know the incoming chief has used it to great effect in Derbyshire. So I'm hoping that as a platform, as a way of engaging, and for small surveys, but equally for sharing of information and crime prevention information, it can be hugely important. So I'm hopeful that we can start re-engaging with the force and using that as a platform, because it's already here, we're already using it. So it's a shame really that we've sort of had a bit of a hiatus, but I think, to be fair, that might help us on that journey of trying to develop our understanding of what the public are thinking and feeling.
I mean, I used that in Leicestershire as well, and we we massively increased the engagement with it, and it was really powerful. I'm a massive supporter of it, so I think it sounds that there's a really positive piece of work there that we can do in this coming year. So it's a really good thing.
And that sort of links into the next bits, really. I mean, I think the community newsletters, my observation on it is that they are well received. I think they are a good step forward. And I would say the same with the joint parish council meetings. I think they're in their infancy, but we've engaged with literally hundreds of parish councils through those. And through that, there was a clear want on their behalf to talk about traffic issues, speeding, weight restrictions, all those kind of things. So we held a separate meeting for them to discuss all of those, and I think they will develop and continue to go from strength to strength, not just from a policing perspective, but I think as a partnership tool to engage with parishes and really connect to local communities. So they're my observations on that. By all means, if you've got anything to add, feel free, but I just thought I would wade in and support them. I think they're a good development.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I agree, and I know we just need to work out the the regime going forward. But no, I think that's been really helpful. So so the next one was around putting more officers on shift when we need them. So obviously we've reviewed and revised our deployment model. Went to that shift pattern, which has been well received. Have got our response investigation teams and the CID response function. So and as you've seen in the performance over this past year has generally speaking improved. So in terms of reductions, in terms of we have had an uptick in terms of outcomes, although very marginal, I would have to agree. So I think that is a piece of work that remains ongoing, and we are now reviewing that. So we're reviewing that model, and the piece of work we're really looking at is how can we help those officers even more by taking more out at the front end in terms of not taking crimes out for not investigating or anything like that, but we do think we've got some duplication that we could take out at the front end and make it a bit more seamless both for the public and for our officers. So that's the next step of that plan, but that kind of thing has been implemented.
So it's implemented, but on a journey. It
is on a journey, and I mean these things kind of always are, aren't they? So I wouldn't like to stand still. So and then maximising the number of police officers in the force. Well, as you know, we've got this cohort that we've just had in 2024. We've got another cohort that will come in September. Under the new Police Constable entry programme.
Yes.
So and obviously ongoing discussions just in terms of what the financial budget will afford. But again, that commitment has been maintained and I think successfully.
I think what's interesting about the new model is obviously the other three routes in still are there, which is great. But then this non-degree required route is also there. What's interesting is the duration. So it's 16 weeks plus then you can obviously have optional bits that you localize, I suppose. So at the moment, I think it's right to say that IPLDIP, as it was, is a 20-week program. So arguably, if you did another 20-week program, you've got 4 weeks of flexibility there, which I think is a really pragmatic, sensible approach from the college to actually try and make it as relevant and current as they could without making it overly burdensome. So hopefully that's how it will work out. Time will tell. I'm sure it'll need tweaking again yet, but hopefully it will work. But September will be our first cohort, won't it, on that new model? So
Yeah.
we should have seen it elsewhere by then as well, because there are some early adopters, aren't there, that are going live anytime.
But we've got to be accredited before we can go live, I think. So our
Yeah.
program has to be accredited. So, so yeah, okay. So that's you know, that's positive. So moving on then to so I think these are, sorry, I've kind of gone into the new
Yeah. No, that's fine.
Into the new look, the forward-looking 2024. So new approach to preventing and tackling antisocial behaviour. So this is the you know, in response, I suppose, to the antisocial behaviour action plan, the £1 million funding that comes in to Lincolnshire for these additional patrols by authority figures in hotspot areas. So I mean, you know, your office has obviously been massively involved with Joe and others in developing this piece of work.
Yeah.
And looking at how we're going to do that and provide the best service for that money, and looking at that analysis of our ASB and serious violence hotspots to have that kind of targeted approach within those areas. So
I think it's a really positive thing that we've got the additional funding. I think it's great that we were able to argue at a national level that we should all have an equal share. So whether you're in the Met or Manchester or Lincolnshire, we've all got the same money, apart from those that were getting the GRIP funding have still got the GRIP funding. So that's really good news. If there's one thing I regret, it's the lack of flexibility in the way that the guidance has been put together, which there's nothing we can do about. We've got to follow the guidance, and unfortunately that does take away some of our flexibility to do what we might have wanted to do in Lincolnshire. But despite that, it's a good news situation. Additional funding, putting additional resources onto the streets to tackle antisocial behaviour is a good thing. But I always like local flexibility, because the people that know best what needs doing in Lincolnshire are the people in Lincolnshire. So I think it's always frustrating when I get somebody in the Home Office dictating how we should approach a problem here. But I do think it's a positive.
yeah, well, at least they've given us some money and not just dictating.
Well, to be fair, usually when they dictate without the money, I tend to take a lot less notice. But at the moment, you know, we will see whether it's a repeating fund of money. It would be great if it was, if it got some longevity. But at the moment, all we know is that it's going to happen in this year.
Joe,
Okay.
want to come in? I think Joe's got her hand up.
Oh, sorry, Joe, because I'm looking at something else. I can't see your face. Apologies.
I just wanted to say the force have done a very helpful piece of analytical work in conjunction with ourselves to identify those hotspot locations. And whilst there are some quite prescriptive criteria, we have made the case to central government that you've already articulated today, Mark, about the challenges of policing a huge geographical area, and therefore trying to identify hotspot locations as very small geographically defined locations in such a large area would mean that we were forever commuting rather than actually acting and having an impact on the situation. So we worked with the force in putting that response together, and so hopefully we'll be able to work flexibly within the rules to still do something that's meaningful and means that the public see an improvement in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Okay.
So the next one that I know was in the sort of future Precept sort of commitments was around exploring and exploiting emerging technologies such as facial recognition and rapid video technology, speeding up engagement with victims of crime, getting them the help they need faster. So I know there's something in there about the digital directorate, which is just, I mean, I know you're aware of this. I mean, a very significant, you know, really a massive job getting that up and running, that digital and data directorate, to try to build that infrastructure. You know, that's a bit of an infrastructure piece. And then you've got the ERP, which again is infrastructure, DEMS and contact management. But I suppose one of the things that we are committed to doing this year then is doing that piece of work around facial recognition. So I know very strong support from your public survey in terms of the use of facial recognition. Well, we're just doing that piece of sort of discovery work, and I know again you're engaged in this. But about what's that going to look like then? What can we feasibly do to start with? You know, what's the starting point for it? Linking it in with CCTV. Some of that might be slightly dependent on getting the digital evidence management system in place. But really exploring this year, how might we use that technology to the best effect to prevent and detect crime. And then with the RVR, the rapid video response piece of work, so that's going to be started in the control room, where we'll be, and this is a response to domestic violence abuse victims, where, you know, and again, there might be, we've looked at travelling times already, haven't we? We've looked at journey times already in terms of how long it can take people to get to incidents. Well, this is where actually the dispatcher can be making that video call back to the domestic abuse victim, and can be having that conversation with them, actually seeing them at the time. So much more, you know, it's just delivering a better response to the victim. So we're starting that with domestic abuse victims, but actually the potential for that with other victims and with other types of call is quite is quite significant. Now, we do know that people would prefer still to get a police officer to turn up at their address. You know, we do know that, and again, that was seen clearly in your survey. But unfortunately, what happens with some of these incidents where they're not urgent response is that they can go into the loop, and just sometimes they are waiting for, you know, over a day, 2 days sometimes before you get a response. So if for those incidents we can respond more effectively by using the video system, I think that, you know, that will really help us to provide that better service to those victims. So they're the things that we've got scheduled for this year. You'll see them in the annual plan for us to be delivering in this coming year. Yeah,
I think use of technology is going to be an ongoing theme, not just for policing but for public sector generally. Whether it's artificial intelligence, machine learning, whether it's facial recognition, there's a whole range of things, but they're all they can only work, as you've pointed out, if the underlying systems are there. And I think that's the bit where key investment is going to go in Lincolnshire, is around the platforms that everything else can be built onto, and that's really important. And I think the problem is they're quite dull subjects to talk about, and they're not very exciting from a public perspective, saying, well, why are the police spending money on IT systems? But everything is built on those. So it is really important that we are efficient and effective at choosing the right ones, getting them implemented on time, on budget. And I know that we've got a good team of people working on all of that. So I think that is really important. And certainly all of the ambition around providing as much digital access, whether it's to report things, whether it's to be fed information back, all of that only works if our systems work. So I think it's an exciting time. But it's going to be a lot of investment over the next few months and years, I think, to get that to where we want it to be.
Yeah, I agree. You've not spoken to Nicola. She finds it exciting.
Well, I'm glad that the head of digital finds it exciting. I mean, that is important that she finds it exciting. But for most of us, it's an impenetrable sort of area of business, and we have to work really hard to sort of keep up with her skill set on it. But it is absolutely vital to literally every area of business, and even you know, the more straightforward old school policing things all have digital involved, don't they? Now there isn't an area of business that doesn't rely on digital, so it's a hugely important area for us.
Okay, so moving on then, the next one we'll talk about is the expanding the roads policing Operation Stronghold. So again, I just think we've had some really massive success with that over the past year in terms of operations that we've done in particular localities, where we've, you know, sent the team. So again, roads policing and specialist ops team, along with neighbourhood teams, going into localities. Neighbourhood teams actually asking on occasions for the resources to go to them, and whether it's in relation to an emerging issue with drugs and county lines, or whether it's in relation to an AMPR operation, that we just want to carry on using those resources in that way, because it really helps with visibility and confidence, I think, from the public. So you know, really happy with continuing with that approach.
So if you had to encapsulate what Operation Stronghold is, Is it, I mean, obviously I can see the words denying criminals the use of the roads and keeping our community safe, but is it a specific set of things, or is that a catch-all term for all roads policing operations?
No, because it's not just a roads policing operation. So although it is primarily led, so it's a specialist ops operation where they will go to a locality and they will most often focus around ANPR. So they'll have ANPR sites. It's a bit of a ring of steel type approach, where they'll have I don't give too much of the tactics away.
Yeah,
here,
sure.
But, but it is focused in a locality that's been flagged for whatever reason. And where they will use the assets available to them to great success, great success in terms of whether it's dealing with criminality or road users, and again that kind of visible presence. And they involve the neighbourhood teams in it as well. So it's not just about the specialist ops; they lead it, but it's not just about them. It's engaging the neighbourhood teams, which again gives people something different to do, gives them chance to think about where they might see their careers going in future in terms of those specialist resources. So it's just a real good team event. So if that will summarise for you what that entails. And then we'll carry on again with the targeted approach, as we've already seen the success of some of these targeted approaches with summertime demand, rural crime, burglary and retail crime. So, we'll have our, tweaked summertime policing plan that will come in this year, had some real success, notable success with that last year in terms of some of the reduction in crime and the better matching resources to the demands of summertime policing, both on the coast and elsewhere. And then, obviously the rural crime team, continuing with their work, and then developing now the retail crime plan. So that is being developed. It's very much a neighbourhood policing approach. So we've got a dedicated chief inspector who's picking that up. So he's taken the national retail crime policy, or national. It's not a policy. It's guidance, and implementing that locally, and really starting to have that meaningful engagement with retail crime in localities.
So just on that then, so there is a developing retail crime plan, which at some point will obviously will be a physical document. I mean, one of the things that I've noticed as I've gone around and done the recent sort of circuit of district councils and speaking to the inspectors, chief inspectors that have attended those to talk about the local area, there's been a huge amount of really good work going on, and I'm assuming that one of the roles of this chief inspector that's coordinating this will be to pull that best practice together and actually share that, because obviously if we get a really good piece of work going on in Boston, and we were hearing some really positive work where they were targeting very prolific offenders and actually it had a significant impact in the reduction of overall shop theft by targeting a handful of people, frankly, that those approaches might be of value to the team in Gainsborough, for example, or so it's so all of that coordination piece will come together under that plan.
And it will go through the neighbourhood policing. So this is all being led through it's a neighbourhood policing approach, but it's a neighbourhood policing approach to tackling crime, which and it's absolutely the right way. So I know that the local partnership meetings are focusing around retail crime, but it will also go from the chief inspector who's got it into the neighbourhood policing, and then they will develop from that things like the best, or developing best practice type stuff, so that they can then share that with whether it's Gainsborough or Lincoln or wherever else. So it's and I think that has got a focus on it that, in all honesty, this time a year ago we probably didn't. So I think there has been some really good work. I know the Boston example is a particularly strong one as well. So
I was just going to jump in on the prevention one, if I may, because I think there is some really good prevention work going on. But I do think, I mean, one of the things that we've done recently is the large sort of campaign around fraud and scams and everything, which we heavily worked with the team on the prevention side. And what was notable was the fact that there were lots of people around the county on the policing side going, this pack's amazing. We've been dying out for some up-to-date sort of literature like this, it's great, which was wonderful. But it sort of highlighted to me that there might be a moment in time to say, actually, what does really positive crime prevention advice, not just the physical telling of people, but actually what resources, physical resources we need. Is there an opportunity to look at best practice and actually do a bit of a review into the approaches? Because it just seemed like there was lots of people at every corner of the county saying we could probably do with a bit of a refresh on this. So I'd be really keen to work with you and the force to obviously support that and make sure that your team have got the best possible advice and support that they can then provide to the public. It just seemed, for whatever reason, that there was a bit of a moment in time where there seemed to be some questions coming up about it. Notwithstanding, there is some really good work going on in prevention, but it just, that physical, what does every PCSO have at their in their hand or in their car that they can hand out given every circumstance? I think there was probably it highlighted that might need a bit of a refresh. Is all I was going to say on that.
Yeah, no, and I think some of that links in, again, plan for the coming year, a bit more emphasis and focus on some of our evidence-based approaches, but that's not, and I think that does link into that a little bit, but also there is the stuff that we've already got. So yeah, I think that's something that we can take away and look at developing.
But I think, as is outlined, there are a number of operations which are really good campaigns. I think as well, it's always difficult to work out what positive outcomes come from a campaign of prevention, and I fully understand that. I mean, it's very difficult. I mean, one of the things we are getting, we have already had some feedback of people saying, well, actually somebody did try to defraud me, and because of the information that we were provided, we were able to protect ourselves, which is great. That is a rare opportunity to go, well, something bad would have happened if we hadn't have provided prevention. And I'm sure there are countless examples of that around the county, but it's really useful to try and understand, isn't it, in the prevention space, how much it works, which is always going to be difficult to prove a negative, prove what didn't happen. But yeah, I think there is a really interesting opportunity there to sort of challenge the traditional ways of delivering some of that prevention advice and look at what we can do to reach people in a different way.
Yeah. And that goes back actually to some of what you're saying, about the Lincolnshire alert system.
Yes.
Because again, with that, you can really target people. You can target the demographic groups, the geographical groups, the age groups. You can target people, in terms of what you're trying to send in terms of preventative information. So I don't know, there's more ways to get people than just that, but yeah. Okay, and then the last one really on here was around the building on the crime reduction results. So this sort of clear hold build and county lines. I think I've touched on county lines already. Something we just do need to keep ever vigilant for, because as we know, when we take a county line out, then it will get, somebody else will come and put themselves in place there. And these are people who come from outside forces, so we want to make it as inhospitable as we possibly can do for people to come and try to do county lines in Lincolnshire, as we have actually with the hair coursing stuff. I think some of the big reductions in the hair coursing is because we've made it just so painful for people to come here and so costly because we take everything off them legitimately. That's where we've had some of those really big reductions. So we'll carry on that focus with county lines, and then the clear hold build. We know we've got a very strong presence and a very strong partnership in Boston that have done quite a lot of the clearing part of this. So national initiative to try to tackle serious and organised crime. So we're using that as a template going forward to say, right, where else do we have any similar problems, and how can we use, again, that best practice that's been developed there in Boston and that's worked very successfully, then translating that across wider pieces of force as appropriate and required.
Excellent. Okay, and the only other thing I was just going to ask, by way of giving you an opportunity to highlight it, really, if people have got evidence and information around drug dealing, suspicious activity, and or if they're concerned about vulnerable neighbours, maybe having people coming and going, and they think they're involved in something. Obviously, we've got the usual channels of the 101, 999 if it's a crime in action, the online reporting, and in addition, Crime Stoppers, which is free to report to and totally anonymous. So the Crime Stoppers line is something that if people are concerned about giving their details, they can still get a report into the police without providing that information. Of course, it's better if they can provide it, but if they feel unable, that is another route that that they can use. Is there anything else you wanted to cover on that before I
in terms of providing that intelligence? Yeah, I mean, all of those routes, absolutely, we would want people to come forward with any of those, any of their concerns, and the only one that you've perhaps not mentioned that is also available is, if they really felt they didn't want to even do Crime Stoppers, but a trusted individual that could report on their behalf. It's not as easy for us to then do something with it because we don't have the knowledge of where the information's come from. So, but where we don't have knowledge, I mean, Crime Stoppers is anonymous as well. So, the best possible way that people can report is to give us the information directly, if at all possible, but totally understand the fact that sometimes, people don't feel able to do that. So Crime Stoppers or a trusted third party to report would be another really good way.
Yeah, thanks. Jo.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you. It was really helpful being able to talk through the delivery of last year's Precept commitments in a bit more detail about this year's. Just prior to this meeting, I had a call with a member of the public who'd called into the office having received his council tax leaflet today. And one of his questions was, it's helpful, but they're only bullet points and I don't know what they mean. Can you tell me? So actually I was able to say, I will signpost you to this meeting, which is recorded, and then you'll be able to see in full detail the Deputy Chief Constable this afternoon talking to that and providing some more context. So thank you. It's just really timely, and it is something that people are asking for. So it's helpful that we've been able to provide it.
It's one of the things I'm really clear on. I think it's beholden on all public bodies that spend taxpayers' money to be transparent about what they spend it on. And I think if we want their ongoing support, then we have to provide some clarity about in year. These are the things that we'll try and prioritise and do. And so I think it is a good opportunity to do that. And I think certainly we'll adopt. I know we cover them off throughout the year on the police and crime panel meetings, but then I think doing this again in a year's time would be useful, just to have that backward look and the forward look. I think that would be good. Excellent. Well, that concludes today's meeting. So thank you very much for joining us today. It was really helpful. We've covered a lot of ground, and thank you very much.